what I did at work this week and where that is.
Or we could just talk about My Dad Wrote a Porno, because I need to get caught up on that. I mean,
I actually don't listen to it, but
it's so funny.
It's a funny show.
Cheska told me about a show on Netflix called like My Husband is Too Big or something. Which that's the English title, but I think the Japanese title is My Husband's Penis is Too Big.
Oh, okay. So it's like not even like, oh, this is kind of funny in translation.
No, that's literally what it's about. I don't know. I don't remember if she said it's good or not, but
weird.
See, the title just reminded me of do you guys watch Jenny Nicholson's videos at all?
No.
Okay, A, you should, because she's amazing. And B, she read the book that kind of was going over the internet rounds called Trigger Warning, because
I know that book.
Yeah. And apparently the main character is just described as big a lot, like just he's physically big, but that's the only thing. And so she basically read the entire book on like in an edited down video, and it was very good. Okay. So you guys should watch her videos.
That sounds funny.
Is that going to be one of our special episodes?
Oh my gosh, we should.
I don't know if you can hear my cat meowing.
No.
Nope.
Hi, Frank.
So I assume I'm going to be hosting today?
Sure.
I mean, since
you're going to bring up the Nintendo 64 as often as possible.
No, I will not bring it up now.
What?
If you bring it up less than 6 times, we can mention one of the good games for it every time you bring it up.
I have positive memories of the Nintendo 64.
Oh, so do I. Rogue Squadron's good.
Oh, Rogue Squadron is great.
Yeah.
I never played it, but I actually own it now.
Yep. I played
Rogue Squadron 3 is a lot better, but that came out years later on the GameCube. So
I can talk about how...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I can talk about how bad Hey Pikachu is. That's a game I don't like on that system.
I played
it's a bad game.
But I played a lot of it.
A lot of Perfect Dark. Played a lot of Aero Fighter Assault.
Whoa.
And Blast Core.
Whoa. We're talking about good games on the N64, Alex.
Aero Fighter Assault's first level was really good. Everything else was ass.
You just described like 85% of games on more like 95% of games on the Nintendo 64.
Shadows of the Empire was real bad.
Yes.
Except for the first level. The first level was great.
Cool concept. The Jet Force Gemini, like the beginning of that game is very good. And then it gets less good as the game goes on.
Yep.
Although I would like to play that game in the rare replay format. I don't think it's in rare replay because it was on Nintendo platform. But I don't know.
I think it was on rare replay. Yeah,
that's cool. I should play it on there because if you had a second stick, I could see that game being better.
Yeah.
I also like the Banjo games a lot, I guess. So.
Yeah,
that's 2 more games. I like DK64 a lot too, even though so many people hate it.
Ogre Battle 64.
I don't like that game, but I understand why people do.
Yep, it's pretty cool. Pokemon Stadium.
I love that game.
It was so disappointing to
Star
me.
Fox 64.
Yeah, that one it's great, but it's so short. And you just play it over and over again. It was disappointing to me to play The Legend of Zelda and be like, oh my God, this world is so huge. I could spend 100 hours in Ocarina of Time just doing all the weird bonus objectives and stuff, like getting the big Goron sword and stuff like that. And then boot up Star Fox and be like, because I was a kid, right? So like, then I boot up Star Fox expecting a game with a similar scope.
Yep.
And then play it for like 2 hours and it's done. And I was like, wait, but the other one was better.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but it came with the Rumble packs, so...
Well, and as an adult, I understand that it's not the same kind of game, so you can't really hold them to the same standard.
Yeah. I don't know. The Nintendo 64 was pretty all right. I liked Wave Race.
It's okay. I think the games that were good on it in spite of the console, in a sense. Like, the controller was not good. And
how about this? Paper Mario.
I never could get into those games, but I understand that that's a me problem and not a problem with the games.
It is a you problem.
Paper Mario is godlike.
As long as we can acknowledge that it's a all of y'all problem that you couldn't get into like Elite and and classic space simulators like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter.
Oh, what? I have my disc copy of X-Wing versus TIE Fighter in that closet.
I kind of meant more nebulously like the larger podcast universe, not just the two of you specifically.
Oh, okay.
I think you and I are maybe the only people, aside from maybe Erica, that's played X-Wing or X-Wing versus TIE Fighter.
Or TIE Fighter.
Or TIE Fighter. TIE Fighter is a little bit more people, I feel like, played TIE Fighter. If you stuck with it for X-Wing versus TIE Fighter and played the Balance of Power campaign, then you were a real one.
Welcome to episode 64.
What are we talking about? Yeah. Episode Nintendo 64 Gaming Fix.
What do you want, kitty cat?
We're your hosts.
No one on the stream can see it, but my cat
is this really the intro or?
Yeah, why not?
What? No, let's know.
I don't know. Then do a real intro.
Okay, this is our like cold open before the theme song go.
We've been cold opening for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, but I don't like what actually makes it onto the recorded version. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 64 of Gaming Fix. I'm your host, Allison, and I'm here with Alex.
The N64 had okay games.
And Pat.
Hello. Space games are better than anything that happened on the N64, except for maybe Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask games.
And Paper Mario. So since this is the episode 64, we have a smaller cast, and at least two of us haven't played that many video games. We were talking a bit before the show about the N64, but I feel like I'm the one who likes it the most out of all of us, which is weird because I actually didn't have that many games for it. It was just my first home console, so it has a big nostalgia place in my heart.
I can see that. That's true for me too.
To be fair, I didn't own that many games, but Blockbuster rentals like almost every weekend, yo.
Yeah, that's kind of how we operated too. I had basically we would rent a game, and if I couldn't finish it over the course of a weekend, then I could add it to a like birthday list or whatever, and then maybe get it there. So like we owned Madden 98 because my dad wanted to play it. And then he got really frustrated because there was a play that you could abuse in that game, and you would just win every time. So he and I would play, and I would just win with a quick toss all the time.
That's great.
Yeah, there's nothing you could do to defend against it.
Wonderful.
That just reminds me though of how we briefly brought up Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which yes, Pat says that it's better on PC, but I played it on Nintendo 64, and that is literally the only game my dad liked playing with me. Like my parents aren't big video game people at all, but I was somehow able to get my dad to keep playing Episode 1 Racer with me. So
to be honest with you, I haven't played the two versions back to back. People might like tear me to shreds for saying that the PC version is better. I just remember we had both of them at different points, and I played the PC one a lot more. So I don't know.
No, that's fair. I had never had the PC one. I bought it on GOG a while back, but
you can't really do the multiplayer as easily, or you couldn't then on PC, because who had two PC gamepads that they were plugging in? Like that wasn't a thing then.
Yeah.
So it was definitely more of a single player game then.
So in the mid to late 90s, what is the most disappointing game you ever rented? Like you were like going in, because you go in, you're going blind. You're just looking at box art, and you just pick up a game, and you're like, I'm going to rent this and play it. And then you get home, and it's just like, this is ass. For me, that was obviously Superman 64. Like that was a big one. But the other big one for Nintendo 64 was Mission Impossible.
I wasn't allowed to play Mission Impossible. I basically wasn't allowed to play games where you like shoot guns at people, and so I only played GoldenEye at my friend's house, and Perfect Dark. Yeah, whatever. My mom was a little overboard on the
My parents were too. I mean, I wasn't allowed to play. I when it came out, I wanted to get World of Warcraft, and my parents would not let me.
I was
the title.
The silly thing, and I love my mother like more than almost anyone on the planet. But like the funny thing was, she was like fine if it was like Star Wars blasters. If that was what was getting shot at people, that was fine. And it was fine if it was fantasy violence. Like Warcraft was okay, even though it was pretty intense and maybe more violent than like GoldenEye when you think of it, because GoldenEye was so low fidelity. Mm-hmm. But if it was real guns, that was the limiting factor.
Sure.
Yeah, my parents weren't a fan of that either. And I wasn't allowed to play M-rated games for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I played M-rated games when I was 10. I got Max Payne when it came out.
That's funny. I finally got to play Halo relatively close to when it came out. So
that's sci-fi. Those are lasers.
No. you shoot a gun.
Yeah.
A lot in that game. But I managed to convince her that Halo would be okay.
But yeah, so what's the worst game or most surprisingly bad game that you guys rented?
I don't know if I ever rented it. Okay, so one of the most formative video game moments for me as a child was when I was sick and my parents were going to let me rent a game from Blockbuster as a you're sick treat. And my first choice was Hey You Pikachu. Second choice was Paper Mario. They didn't have Hey You Pikachu, so I got Paper Mario, and that kind of kickstarted a love of RPGs, and I think it's very formative in what kinds of games I like. So I don't remember if I ever actually was able to rent Hey You Pikachu, or if I just bought it. But man, I have so many childhood memories of just shouting like, "Pikachu, pick up the carrot! Pikachu, pick up the carrot!" For that is like one of the biggest memories of playing the Nintendo 64 for me. Is that but for the most part, my Nintendo 64 or game rental and gameplay at that time was really, really Pokemon heavy. So I don't know if I was really ever super disappointed, because you could just put Pokemon JPEGs on anything and I'd be like, it's great. So
it's a pinball game now.
Yeah, hey, Pokemon pinball's great.
It is.
So for me, I think it was definitely. So my friends and I would get, we would get different consoles at different times. So kind of so everyone could try different games. Really my best friend and I did this. And then we would go over to each other's houses for the weekend for this week I want to play Sega games. So one weekend he and I got, his mom to go to Blockbuster, and we rented Nights into Dreams.
Ouch.
That game was really bad. Really, really bad.
What, you don't like spinning through loops?
Yeah, and we didn't have the 3D controller because we rented it. So it's even worse with a D-pad. At least the 3D controller had that stupid fake analog stick thing that was like a trackball on springs. But yeah, Nights into Dreams was a very disappointing and terrible video game.
I don't think anyone here is going to disagree with you.
No. And we were kids, so we didn't know what it was going in. We were just oh, this looks cool. And it was trash. We played it for 45 minutes and then stopped playing it and didn't touch it again for the rest of the weekend.
Hey, at least at that age you had discerning tastes.
Yeah. I don't know. Some would argue against that because there were other games that I really loved. One of my favorite, I just remember, one of my favorite N64 games that I don't know if that many people really enjoy is Mystical Ninja. The Zelda the Goemon one that was on. I never liked they never got into the earlier ones on Super Nintendo. I didn't even know it was a sequel when I played it then. Mm-hmm. But the N64 version was so weird and had so much different stuff in it. Sometimes it felt like Zelda, sometimes it felt like Mario 64, sometimes it felt like a fighting game when you did the mech stuff. It was just a weird, cool game.
Yep, I rented that one. It was also weird, which somehow triggered my synapses, and I remembered another one that I loved, which was Beetle Adventure Racing.
I think I probably played that.
I think I've heard that's not that I never played it, but
it was surprisingly good. You're playing Volkswagen Beetles, but you're going through Amazonian rainforests and like jumping through waterfalls as secret hidden parts, and it's like really fast and really.
That's funny.
It's super secret heavy and fun. Yeah, it's great.
I also played rented Buck Bumble several times.
Oh God,
it didn't ever get better. Every time I rented it, I thought maybe it would be better this time, and it was never better.
It's got that sick theme song though.
Yes, that sick dumb theme song.
Yep.
Well, it looks like IGN gave Beetle Adventure Racing 9.1. So
wow.
Yeah.
So
people agree it's good.
People thought highly of it. That's great. Because that game ruled. Anyways.
Anyways, so more recent video games. Some of us have played some. So let's start with Pat. How about a game that you have played?
I think we lost Pat.
Oh, Pat. Okay, never mind. So, Alex, what have you been doing this week?
What a wonderful time for him to step away. Wonderful. I had a really busy week. It's been a super busy week. Haven't had much time for games. Even after today's cast, I'm going straight back into being ultra busy. So, if you're watching live, that's why we're doing this a bit earlier. Or that's among the reasons we're doing this a bit earlier. But despite that, thankfully, I've had some time to engage with a few things. One of which is the final episode of an airing show from this season, and the other is a new album. So which one do y'all want to hear about? Well, first, you'll hear about both.
You should do the show first.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So the show, it's another anime. As you may have heard, it's a Japanese animation.
Japanimation.
Yeah.
From Japan. Yep. And it is called Mob Psycho 100, specifically season 2. So if you have not heard of this show, it's from the same creator as One Punch Man. So if you've ever heard of One Punch Man, it's kind of a comedy action show that is extremely popular. Mob Psycho, same creator, similar art style in terms of the character design and stuff like that, but way different feel. Still has comedy. It actually kind of reminds me of Breaking Bad in the sense that the first season has a surprising amount of comedy, but then like once you get to the end of the first season and like basically all of the second season, it's basically a character drama, and then like with really intense action scenes. And yeah, I don't know. The very short version, if you don't want to hear all about it, is that it is extremely good. And the online reaction to the end of the second season was like the most universally positive I've maybe ever seen. Like lots of people saying it's in their top 3 of all time, then it's going to go down as an all-time classic along with shows like Full Metal Alchemist and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's extremely good as well. The interesting thing about it, for me at least, is that like it's an action show, so it has conflict, but the conflict isn't really coming down to like warring factions or anything like that. So similar to One Punch Man in concept, the main character, whose name is Mob, is basically like the most powerful person in the universe, where in One Punch Man, he's One Punch Man. He's the strongest. He can punch anything and it explodes. Mob is an Esper. He's psychic. So he's the most powerful psychic that exists. But he's extremely sensitive and believes everyone has infinite potential. So even if they don't have psychic powers, and even if they aren't as powerful as he is. So the whole show ends up kind of being about empathy, which is really unique for that medium.
That's cool.
Like, it's really, 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 really good in that sense. Like it and every character in the show rules. Like it breaks stereotypes all over the place. Like one of them is the quote unquote body improvement club, who they're initially introduced to the show as being these big, dumb, scary bro type looking dudes, like just muscle bound, like meatheads. But like even within a few episodes, they end up being maybe the most wholesome and kind-hearted characters in like the whole show, which is awesome.
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
They're really, really caring and just sweet and always encouraging people to be better. And like the kind of thing where if you've ever been to a gym and there's like the guys who have been there forever, if you're just starting there, they're the ones who are encouraging you. They aren't like saying like, oh, you can't go as far as we can when you run. They're like, yeah, you're doing it. Good job. You're improving. So like characters like that all over the place.
That's cool.
Yeah. On top of the great characters, like the direction is stunning. Like the action scenes are straight up like movie quality. Like there's a couple specific episodes in the second season which were just mind-blowing, like just mind-blowingly well animated. And on top of that, like the story is extremely good. It goes places in the second season. Like it takes some unexpected turns, and it's 100% worth watching. Erica, if you listen to this episode, this show is 100% for you and Xavier. That show 1000% recommended. Even if you aren't into anime, like there's no caveats to that. There's no fan service to explain away. It isn't into like weird Japanese or anime tropes. Like there's no Japanese specific cultural references like that. Very easy to get into. So excellent. And it, along with Promised Neverland, are easy 10 out of 10 shows from this season.
Cool. I've heard about that, but I might have to go check that out.
Yeah, I like One Punch a fair bit, but the thing that I really liked how subversive that show is, and I like all of the like writing and character development and stuff. I thought that the main character's arc was really interesting, from this kind of like apathetic kind of nihilism almost to like finding reasons to care about things again. Some of the extent to, I like the concept of starting at this character is crazy powerful and really, really like the strongest in the world. It got so cosmic in One Punch that I started to like lose interest as the conflict started to escalate. I really liked the more like kind of poignant character stuff from earlier on in the series. So it sounds like this show maybe captures more of that throughout it, rather than turning into more of a just like, because like I like the fight scenes later on in One Punch, but near the end it got so hyperbolic where he's like punching through spaceships and stuff. It's just like, it lost it a little bit for me near the end. Yeah.
And I liked One Punch Man, but I think this show is infinitely better.
Cool. Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah, so 100% recommended to anyone. If we were still doing monthly do this thing recommended by this person, like that one is easy. That would have been easy. But yeah, cool. So that show's great. The other thing that I got, again, like last week, a new album came out, which is, something you can do in the background while doing other stuff. But it's the new Periphery album. So I know, Pat, you've also heard it. And let me say in advance, it's been an extremely good past 7 days for music.
Seriously,
between both this and Empath. So if you are into prog and or metal, this is a must-listen album. The only caveat I have is like if you're not super into those genres, is you have to have a tolerance for harsh vocals, which like I've had forever. But I know for some people it can be jarring or like grating if you're not used to it. So
what I will say about Periphery is I think that if you are someone who really appreciates appreciates heavier instrumentation and are interested in kind of acquiring a taste for harsher vocals, I think they are the best band aside from maybe Between the Buried and Me. I think they're the best band that combines clean and harsh vocals. That's kind of a trope of metalcore bands of the last 10 years or so to do that a lot. And I think a lot of times the clean vocals end up sort of sucking versus the harsh vocals. Whereas like Between the Buried and Me does it really, really well too, although their earlier stuff is almost entirely harsh. Whereas there's kind of a more even split across Periphery's catalog between harsh and clean vocals. And Spencer Sotelo from Periphery has just this incredible voice that he can like go back and forth between the two instantly, like pretty much perfectly. And it sounds amazing.
Yeah, he can combine them really well as well. Actually, that's another thing you could say about Empath and Devin Townsend. He also does that kind of combination. Yeah,
his kind of harsh vocals are such a different thing to me than what I'm kind of getting at. His harsh vocals are so much more like he uses them more sparingly, I feel like, especially on Empath. So it's sort of more of a, even if he's an example of like, even if you don't like harsh vocals, I would say you're fine, because his harsh vocals are not grating in the same way as I could see like bands like Periphery and Between the Buried and Me coming off.
Totally. Yeah. And like, if you need a frame of reference, like you could see like you could boil Periphery down to being like kind of a more modern Linkin Park without the rap kind of stuff.
To an extent, yeah, there's similarities there for sure. They're more progressive than Linkin Park, I think. And like the instrumentation is on a bajillion levels higher. They're much more complex.
It's supremely technical.
Yes.
But yeah, the new album, Periphery 4, Hail Stan, it's really diverse. It's like it's got some tracks which are basically like radio rock, like almost poppy, and then it has some straight up super heavy like death/black metal.
and like the two extremes of those two things are my two favorite tracks on the album. Like It's Only Smiles is the poppiest song they have ever done. I think it's a Black Minute is also like that too, but it's even more so because it has much more like soaring kind of like uplifting vocals in it. Mm-hmm. And then Blood Eagle is my other favorite track on the album, which is like some of the heaviest stuff they've ever done.
It's really great. It's about an hour long. It's a journey. I don't know. For Periphery, they have a whole bunch of albums out. My personal ranking, I think I put Juggernaut as my number one favorite of theirs, followed closely by this, which is maybe tied with Periphery 2.
Yeah, so. I think what's cool about them, I mean, I'm sure it's come up on this podcast many times, but like my favorite band ever is Coheed and Cambria. And what I love about Periphery and why they're kind of climbing my list of favorite bands is that something that's amazing about Coheed is that they have grown over time and they sound very different over time, but they have consistently been very high quality. So you can go back and listen to like their first album and it doesn't sound bad. Like if you go back and listen to I don't know, like Jimmy World's first album, it's, even though they grew to be like this hugely successful commercially and critically kind of band early on in their career, you can see that you can tell that they were younger and not operating at the same level. Whereas if you look at a band like Coheed and Cambria, and Periphery does this too, their earlier sound is very different, but they're very consistent over the course of their catalog.
Yep.
What I think the Periphery 4 is so amazing for, and is in a similar way to Coheed's Good Apollo 4, they've expanded the range of what they're willing to do on a single album so much with this one that it's definitely, I think it's probably my favorite of theirs, but I would rank Juggernaut a close second. So I don't know. I have to listen to it a lot more times, but
it's, there's just maturity at some point.
Right. Yeah. It's not that their earlier work is less technically proficient or less well produced or less interesting. It's just the diversity of like the range of sounds they're producing just continues to grow. And that's really exciting because that's key to progressive music. And I think a lot of less quality prog bands just see progressive music as like, oh, you just mix elements of jazz fusion and classical music with heavy metal and that's all it takes. But it's really, progressive also means progressive over the course of your career in addition to being progressive within a song.
Yeah. Yep. Either way, great album. Check it out if you're into that genre, or if you're not, I don't know, give it a shot. Maybe.
I think it's worth giving it a listen, even if you're not someone who typically likes that kind of music.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's all I've really had time for this week.
Very cool. Maybe I'll give that a shot as well. I don't know. I'm very new to that genre, but
Mob Psycho,
seriously, you should listen to. Everyone should listen to "It's Only Smiles." I think that's a great, like, very friendly track. And if you like what you hear there, maybe take a stab at some of the other stuff on that album.
I would agree. "It's Only Smiles" is extremely good.
Cool. So I'm going to use this as an excuse to bring up another music thing that Pat and I are both interested in, and that's the new Blackpink came out this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The interesting song.
It is an interesting song. Have you, sorry?
I haven't actually seen it. I know I sent it to you guys, but I didn't actually watch it.
I think I like it less and less as I listen to it, unfortunately.
I like it in theory, and I like pieces of it.
Totally, yeah.
but I feel like it feels kind of unfinished in a way.
Yeah,
like I feel
agree.
like I have issues with do, but like, which is always the weirdest song to say the title of, but like I feel like its big hooks are a lot more, I guess, catchy than Kill This Love.
I agree.
Whereas like I have issues with do, but like when it gets to the finger guns part in the song, I'm always going to be like, woo.
Yeah. Whereas there's no, I like the way that the chorus in this song is constructed, but it's not catchy at all.
No, and it's kind of empty, and I feel like that would be fine if they like continuously added new elements to it. Like if the first one was empty and then like the second one was fine, and then they added a third chorus at the end, and it was just like this big bombastic thing that could be really cool. But I think also, especially since they effectively end after the bridge of the song, like the song just kind of ends.
Yeah,
it's a little jarring.
What's interesting is that I believe it's the most like successful K-pop song. I saw something saying that it's like one of the most successful K-pop songs of all time. If you look at like how quickly it like has gained the views that it has. I don't know. I didn't read the article, but
it hit number 1 on the iTunes chart, and it's apparently the first time in years, like even a girl group has, let alone like this is the first time a K-pop girl group's hit number 1, which is cool. And I think it's just because we are like, as K-pop listeners, just starved for content with Blackpink. So I've listened to it several times, not necessarily because I think it's great, but because I'm like, okay, this is something new, and I will listen to it.
And I will say that the video is like really, really, really cool. The video is a lot better than the song, which I think is true of most of their, like, I think that's true of the other stuff that they've put out generally. But I also don't think it's bad either. It's just that there's very, very good K-pop coming out all the time now. And
right.
So when you kind of put it up against those, it's interesting that this one is the one that's taking off so much.
Well, and especially since I feel like it's so easy to compare to their earlier tracks. Like it's so easy to compare to, like, just because of how few tracks they've had. And I feel like it's hard to say that I would listen to this over like Boombaya or As If It's Your Last or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and this was Allison and Pat's K-pop corner. Woo.
Hell yeah.
The K-pop minute.
Half hour into this podcast, haven't talked about new video games.
I would also, we don't even need a video for this because I have even less nuanced thoughts about it. I've only listened to it a time so far, but new pop album came out yesterday as well. It was a pretty good day for music releases. It's really good. If you like pop punk, they're I think my favorite band doing that right now. And the new album is also very mature and kind of, it's their third full length. And it's definitely a maturation of their sound as well. There's a lot more kind of nuanced lyricism on it, I think. And it's relatively simple compared to something like Periphery when it comes to like the music part, but it's really good. And they're an awesome band. So if you like pop punk, you should listen to that too.
While we're using this as a venue to talk about music, I'll say a one sentence one. If you like jazz/funk, check out the new Snarky Puppy album. It's really good.
I like both of those things, so I will definitely check that out.
And go pre-order the new Thank You Scientist while you're at it. There you go.
All right. Video games.
Last one. I bought tickets to see Carly Rae Jepsen, and I'm really excited. Okay.
And you got the VIP tickets, didn't you?
Yeah. So, it was one of those things where I was not intending on it, but I wanted to have a decent seat, and it was really not that much more expensive. So I coughed up the money, and I'm going to do the whole, like, there's like a whole Q&A. There's like, you can be there during like part of her sound check, I think.
Oh,
and
cool.
there's like a picture, like either I think it's like a group picture. I'm not sure if it's just like individualized, but it sounds fun. So I'm excited because Emotion is an amazing album, and I'm really excited for a new album.
So this a little bit of insight, because I've been in metal bands and like death metal bands and stuff like that. I have never met a metal musician who does not like Carly Rae Jepsen. Just so you know.
I went to her tour for the Emotion, or like her tour to promote Emotion, and it was like 95% just music nerds there.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, she's great.
Like there are a couple of like young kids there who are like clearly just like called me maybe, but like it was just like all like music nerds who are just like so excited when Runaway With Me comes up. We're all just like, yes, this song. And it's so yeah, if you're a music nerd, you really should be into Carly Rae Jepsen. Agreed.
I'm a music nerd who is not at all into Carly Rae Jepsen, so I need to read a treatise or something.
Okay, I will find one and send it to you because she's amazing.
She's an awesome person, so don't get me wrong. I have nothing against. I'm glad that she garners so much excitement in people. This isn't a Game of Thrones thing where I'm like, stop talking about it.
Well, okay, so time for me to go on my treatise about how Jaime Lannister is the most interesting character.
Okay, bye everyone.
Episode 64. Oh, no.
Episode 64. It ends with Allison just being just like fade out on me going, let's so video games.
Video games.
This is ostensibly this is in theory a video game podcast. So Pat, you've played some video games.
We played a bunch of video games. Let me think, man, where should we start? Well, I finished Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories.
Party City.
That's a bad video game. It is not good. And it's so sad because it would be good if it only didn't have dumb progression and you can't get cards you want or need. You just have to grind for money to get random packs of them. And even that is a limited thing that you could run out of the ability to do. And the boss battles suck. So anyway, what doesn't suck at Chain of Memories is how fucking wild the story gets. And it's so wild because Kingdom Hearts 2 would not make any sense if you didn't play Chain of Memories. Chain of Memories was a Game Boy game. So like starting Kingdom Hearts 2, I was just like, how the way Chain of Memories ends, I was very much kind of like, oh, weird. I wonder how they address all of this stuff that happened in Kingdom Hearts 2, because it seems like all of this was very important. It would be a shame if it didn't matter. And then Kingdom Hearts 2 starts and it's like a direct sequel to Chain of Memories. It is not, it is, and it would have to be, but it's like, it's so weird. Like Sora's in like a sleep pod and he's getting a bunch of memories back. And there's like people with like on computers, there's like a half dozen major characters that get introduced in Chain of Memories that they just assume in Kingdom Hearts 2. They don't like reintroduce them. They're just there. And it's wild. And Kingdom Hearts 2 is a pretty good game. I'm enjoying that one a lot. So much so that like I sit down on the couch and I'm like, well, I could work more on playing Sekiro, a game that I super do love and enjoy, and I want to play, like try to get through as much as I can before the end of the year, or I could play Kingdom Hearts 2. And most nights I've chosen Kingdom Hearts 2 just because it's like less stressful and a very good video game. It like builds on aspects of the first one. It's very similar to the first one, more so than I was expecting actually, but it builds on the combat of the first one in a smart way where there's more, you have a little bit more agility. The enemy design is a lot more interesting. There's a much greater variety of enemies. It's just like, and then also the story is, again, if you didn't know what happened in Chain of Memories, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I could see why people wouldn't like it, but I think it's very propulsive and it's really interesting to kind of see where things will go. And I'm excited to see how like all of the stuff, it's already spiraling out of control. So I'm excited to see how it spirals out of control more with 2 more handheld games. after this.
From what I know about Kingdom Hearts, it is going to spiral out of control.
And the cool thing that I've managed to largely avoid, like spoilers for stuff. So I more or less knew the plot of the first game up until the very end, but I didn't. And I know about I knew that Organization 13 was like a shadowy group that existed. And I knew that Roxas was some weird character you played as at the beginning of Kingdom Hearts 2. But beyond that, and I know that there was a Keyblade War at some point. Beyond that, I don't know that much about the lore of the series. So 2 is very interesting in how it builds on that. And I've kind of grappled back and forth, and I probably will until the end of the series, with the ways in which that game, and I think this is one of the more divisive elements of its plotting. When you go to the Disney worlds, you don't. Yeah, I know. You're largely just sort of playing along with an element of the plot. Like the Mulan world is the first one that I went to, because I actually forgot that was a thing in the game. Mushu shows up in Chain of Memories, but he's you actually go to the Land of Dragons, which is like the Mulan world in Kingdom Hearts 2. Is
Mushu voiced by Eddie Murphy?
No, actually, I wasn't going to bring this up. I was going to save this for our Kingdom Hearts cast, but Mushu's voiced by a white dude doing an Eddie Murphy impression.
Oh no!
Oh dear.
I'm willing to say that game came out 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So we'll just move on from that. But when I looked at the voice actor, I was like, there is no way that it's this white dude. And I looked into it, and it is. And he's got a pretty good Eddie Murphy impression for what it's worth, but holy shit. What the hell? That's so bad.
I know this was from a long time ago, but who was like, this is fine.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange, and definitely made me less excited about whenever Mushu opened his mouth. Kind of wish I had preserved that magic for myself. Anyway, it is a good video game, that aside. And it's interesting in the Mulan world. You go through, you meet Mulan, and you help her gain the trust of the commander guy, the captain, and then you end up doing the avalanche scene. Except that what's his name? The bad guy. The bad guy has a bunch of Heartless with him instead of a bunch of warriors. So you fight the Heartless a bit, but then Mulan still shoots the cannon at the mountain and causes the avalanche and everything. And then you go to the Imperial City, and there's the whole the emperor gives her list of crimes and then says, and you saved us all, and they bow to her and everything. So it goes through that kind of quick hits of the story of the movie. And in a lot of ways, that's been criticized a lot, because it's not really advancing the plot of Kingdom Hearts that much. You're kind of just dropping in for part of the story. And that's not true on every world, but it's definitely true there. And it's largely true of a lot of the places that you go. So I kind of get that criticism, but I also think it's a cool way to experience, to drop in on the plot of a Disney movie that will never get a good video game.
That's true.
That part of it's kind of cool. So I have mixed feelings on it, I guess.
I'm looking up the voice actor, what played Mushu. Apparently he regularly stands in for Eddie Murphy. He was in Dr. Dolittle 3. He was the singing voice for Eddie Murphy in the Shrek movies.
So that's still not good, but it makes me feel a little bit better about him portraying Mushu in Kingdom Hearts, because at least they just went, who's the stand-in for Eddie Murphy on voice acting gigs when we can't afford him? And they just picked that guy. It wasn't
it wasn't just here, we need somebody to do an Eddie Murphy impression.
Yeah.
Hey, this white guy, try it.
Yeah, that's a little bit better, but still, come on.
Yeah, it wasn't a one-time thing. He also stands in for Arnold Schwarzenegger, apparently.
God.
Okay, that's kind of the dream role, is to just be able to I don't know, do the video game adaptations of things that like they're too, like celebrities are too good to do.
Yeah. It's just weird that it's a white dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really like it. I'm not going to continue to look up the voice cast of these characters. The original actress that played Mulan, though, is Mulan in Kingdom Hearts. That's kind of cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But anyway, Kingdom Hearts is good. I'm through a few worlds now, and I'm gonna keep chugging along there. Then let me think. What are the other good ones to talk? Oh, I should talk about the game that's probably the one that I'm going to tell you should go buy and play because it's really good. Is Islanders. Islanders is it just came out I think yesterday.
I saw this one. Yeah.
So it's a micro city builder strategy game. It's like extremely smart and interesting so far. I haven't put a ton of time into it, but it plays at a clip where like you can kind of see what it's doing with an hour. I played like an hour or so of it, I think, between this morning and last night. And it's definitely designed for that. I'm actually a little surprised that it's not on mobile, but it's okay. That's not a knock on it. It doesn't feel like a mobile game. It just seems like a game. It feels like one of those super, super high quality, like Monument Valley or something, like a super high quality mobile game that works fine on PC. But I'm surprised that it's not also there because
I was wondering about that too, because I saw something about it and I was like, oh, this looks like it would be a really good iPad game, but then didn't see it, so I was wondering if that was.
So I think the reason is because you actually kind of need precise controls to play it, because you're what the game is you get this really pretty looking island that has a really striking kind of stripped down art style. Excuse me. And you're building basically a city on it, but you're doing it with packs of buildings. There's no resources in the game. So you start off and you'll get a choice between like the sawmill pack or the farming pack. You pick the sawmill pack and it comes with a sawmill and 3 loggers. And so what you're trying to do is score points. That's always what you're trying to do, is score points by placing the buildings. So if you place the loggers near trees, every tree they're near gives the logger 1 extra point for placing the building. And then if you place a sawmill, but the loggers, you get minus points if you place loggers next to each other. They all the buildings have a sphere of influence. So you want to place the buildings near trees, but you want to place the loggers far enough away from each other that they're not reducing each other's points.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so then you want to place a sawmill in between them, because the sawmill gets points based on how many loggers it's near, and it loses points based on how many other sawmills it's near. So it's all about, it distills the city building experience, because in a lot of ways, that's what city builder games are, is they're trying to balance where you're placing services versus where you're zoning for, RCI, residential, commercial, and industrial. So in this case, then you get into like, okay, so you've built your sawmills, and then you get, let's say you manage to get 30 points from placing the sawmills and the loggers. So then you get to pick a new pack. So now you're picking the city pack. So you're starting to place buildings. So you have to place the city center. There's always, on the early islands, later on you actually get to pick the placement of it. But on the early islands, there's a statue, like a monolith somewhere on the island. Almost every building gets a bonus if its sphere is close enough to the statue. But the one you really want to put next to it is the city center, because what happens is you place the city center and then you want to place houses close to the city center because they get points there. And then there are mansions, which get points by being close to the city center specifically, and then being close to other like pretty things like parks and fountains. But you don't want mansions to be close to like sawmills and mines and other industrial things. So like it's really cool, because as time goes on, eventually you'll find that like, oh, now I got the circus pack. The circus scores a ton of points when it's near houses, but it plummets in value when it's close to mansions. So it's like, it is like, the idea there is like, it's like low income entertainment. So it's positive there. There's things like breweries. It has a ton of different stuff. Like temples are great if they're near houses, but you don't want them near markets. You don't want them near like taverns, they have to just be near houses and walls. That's where temples want to be placed. So there's a certain degree of planning that you have to do, because you have to plan for, eventually I'll probably get a pack of buildings that includes this building. But at the same time, you're trying to get points, because the points are how you unlock new packs. So basically you lose when you run out of ways to get points, when you've placed all of your buildings and you can no longer get any more points because you didn't plan it close enough. What's neat is that the game doesn't really punish you for that, because all you have to do is just click a button and start a new island. So it plays at such a clip that you're not like spending hours on one city only to run out of point building options and then be screwed. Instead, it's just roll up a new island and then move on. And I believe the islands are procedurally generated, so in theory, you could just play forever.
Cool.
And there's different. The islands are like the most recent one that I played. It had very little surface area, but I kept getting these packs of water platforms. So I was building my city on platforms in the water, and then placing sort of my more industry focused buildings on the little bit of land that I had to be able to like mine rock and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's $5. So it's like really, really cheap to get in. And I don't think it's a game that you're going to play for 100 hours or anything. They specifically say in their little, like, is this game for you video on their Steam page that it doesn't have late game super complex buildings that are like really, really, really hard to use. They're all kind of the same conceptually. But it looks really pretty. And even when you're done and you're at that game over state, it doesn't like tell you that. It just lets you scroll around the island still to look at it and take screenshots if you want, if you built this pretty thing. So it's very, very cool. The one thing that I wish it did that it doesn't do is once you click to place the building, it's down. There's no undo button. There's no way to move buildings. You can't even delete them and like take the point hit for deleting them. I really wish that you could just undo your last placement. I think that would be smart, because it is really smart about the way it tells you how many points you're going to get from placing it. It just shows you, like, in the sphere, it has little numbers showing you all the positive and negative point impactments. And then like on the building itself, as you're mousing it around, it'll tell you the total number of points it'll give you. And that's great. But sometimes you'll be like placing it and then you'll nudge it a little bit. And like, oh, in this placement, it would have gotten 20 points versus 10. But because you're trying so carefully to place it, the mouse moves a few pixels and then you click and then you only got 10 points. And I don't think that's like a big enough deal that it should deter anyone from playing it, but it would be cool if they had some kind of quick undo feature. I don't think that would like make it easier or anything. It would just help with misclicks to not to be able to like more precisely place things. But I recommend it. I think everybody should check it out.
Yeah, I actually just bought it off Steam because I like city builders, but I kind of like the feel of it just because it looks like it could be kind of a chill experience.
Yeah, it's super chill.
Which I like, because I like city builders, but I don't necessarily want like a super intense one.
Yeah. In terms of style, it kind of reminds me of a mobile game. I don't know if you guys have ever played it, called Polytopia.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
It kind of has a similar feel there, though Polytopia is more like almost like Civilization rather than a city builder.
And then they made this, I believe it was the Polytopia devs made a city builder too, that is very much like SimCity, like very, very, very much. And that's cool too. This game does not have, there's nothing really, it's just you place the building, it gives you points. When you get enough points, you get a new pack of buildings. There's no resources that are flowing. There's nothing. The buildings aren't affecting each other than when you place a new one, you're getting points based on what you've done. There's interesting, like there's really cool stuff though. Like there's a shaman building. The shaman just wants to be near flowers. When you place the shaman, it's just, you get bonuses by being near flowers.
That's great.
But other buildings want to be close to the shaman. So if you place the shaman, you want to place the shaman in an open area that you haven't really developed yet that has flowers around it. But then mansions love to be next to the shaman. So if you then later place a mansion next to the shaman, then that will give the mansion more points. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting, cool little things like that where like you do sort of start to get into a planning the city out ahead of time. as you get deeper into the game. So yeah, I don't know. It's $5. It's totally worth playing. And it plays really fast too. Like I love city builders, but my problem with them is I will play a city builder like City Skylines for 5 or 10 hours to build like a decent medium-sized city, and then I want to see the like wild end game stuff, like building highways and building airports and things. But it's so much of a time investment. Like you can get a lot out of those games by playing them for a few hours, and then the mid game on them is so crawling in a lot of cases. And that's not a thing that happens with this game because you finish an island in 15 minutes.
So
and then
what you're saying is that Islanders is basically the dive kick of city builders.
Sure, you can make that argument. Yeah, and I think you could play it at a pretty high level where you're really, really getting every single inch out of your island too. So I don't think that it's not that it's like super, super easy either. It just moves at a really nice clip. It's really easy to keep growing and learning with it because you just roll that new island and you're good to go.
Oh, that's good to hear, because the one city builder cities that I've got, or series I've gotten really into is Tropico, just because I feel like especially with the campaign, it moves at a really nice pace.
Yes.
So that's probably my biggest issue with a lot of city builders as well. So
yeah, Tropico and Anno, when they're good, get around that problem. Those are my two favorite city buildings.
That's funny because Tropico just came out and Anno's soon to come out.
I know, and I want to play both of those games, but I just haven't really had time. Anno I might break for because it looks absolutely spectacular. The screenshots of that game are like, holy crap. But I always wait to see on those games because Anno has had bad games in the past. So like 2070, not very good. So yeah, I still will echo the idle thumbs call. They should make an Anno 2007. The Anno games titles, the numbers always add up to 9 in them. So there's like 1602 and 2077, not 2077, 2070, and whatever the future one is, 2700 or something. They should make an Anno 2007 that's based on the financial crisis in the United States in 2007.
Going into 2008,
that would be
that's
really interesting. Like take the concept of all of the, like in the future one, it's like you're trading resources with the moon. In all of the old, like 1602, it's all about like building a trade empire overseas. In 2007, you could make it all about like stock prices and like banks and stuff like that, and it could be really interesting. But anyway,
industry.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll try not to like just talk for the next half hour at both of you. But the other two things I got into this week, I played some Elder Scrolls Blades. That's another one that I guess you could just go get because it's free.
Though there's a kind of not a waiting list, but like a queue to kind of get in, right?
That actually, it came out for real yesterday. So the queue's
cool.
Yeah, there was that, but now you can just play it. That game is like, as long as you come in with the expectations of it's an Elder Scrolls mobile game, it's a really cool game. It's not, it doesn't have an open world, so you're just kind of like selecting missions and then going on them. But it looks fantastic. It's like, normally mobile games have to adopt some kind of more stylized art to be able to look good, because realistic art doesn't usually look great on phones, but they managed to do the standard Elder Scrolls style and it looks great on phones. The combat is more engaging than I was expecting. The way the game works structurally is the like sort of hub is this city that you're rebuilding over time. And then there's a few ways you can go out. You can pick a mission from a list of story missions, like story quests, that have more diverse environments associated with them. There's some sort of randomly generated quests you can just go on. You get daily ones and weekly ones. And then there is this sort of procedurally generated abyss that you're trying to get down as far as you can in. That's kind of cool too. But the mission, it's different tile sets, but it's always the same. You go to these, whether it's a forest or a dungeon or whatever, and you're going along a pretty linear path. There's usually a couple of offshoots, but generally it's pretty linear. And you're just moving through the environment, picking up treasure chests, picking up resources, and then you get into fights. And when you get close to an enemy, it just locks you into a fight with them. And then the fighting is kind of like Pokemon Go in a way, except it's more complicated, and you don't like have to flick the button, but you do hold it down until a circle builds. And if you let up when the circle's at its biggest, then it'll do a critical hit. And so then you can do combos by going from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen and back and forth with kind of a rhythm, which is cool. You have a shield button. So when the enemy kind of winds up an attack, you can hit the shield button to block them. And then you also get, as you level up, you get a bunch of skills and spells and stuff. So they're icons on the screen. You can equip a few of them at a time. And there'll be things like dodges or buffs or debuffs or just damaging attacks. So the combat is actually a little more like different enemies are weak to different things. And so there is like some strategy involved. If you're going into a crypt and you know it's going to be skeletons, you should bring a bashing weapon instead of a slashing weapon. So it has a lot of that stuff. And then the gear is very much what you would expect. You're getting like different rarity colors and different levels of items that you're equipping. The thing that is going to turn people off, and I don't really understand. I mean, what do you expect? It's a free to play game, but the chests are on timers. So you pick up chests and then you have to kick off a timer. I've never really understood why that bothers people so much, especially in this game. Like you can continue to do quests. It's not like what you get out of that chest is gating your progress. So you can keep playing it. The chest can go, I've seen gold chests, which take 5 hours is the longest timer I've seen. And the game by default doesn't send you notifications. Like the notifications are off and you have to go into the settings to turn them on. And if you do that, then it'll ping you when your chests are done. But it's very unobtrusive with how it manages that stuff. The other timer-based thing is you're rebuilding this city. And so when you choose to place a building, you spend the resources and then it takes a certain amount of time to construct it. So that's a time gate also, but the buildings don't really gate your progress either. They increase your town's level and that gives you different bonuses. But I don't know. It's relatively simple. It's a little more complicated than these kinds of games tend to be, and the combat is engaging, but it's still not as complex as if you were to play a like MMO or something. It's not quite at that level, but I think it's really fun, kind of just a fun little mobile experience. And I think that if they continue to build on it and add more interesting things to do, then it could be even better over time. And as far as something to just like play on transit or something or on a break, it's really fun for that. And it moves between portrait and landscape in a really cool way. Like when you're in portrait, you just tap to move and that works great. And when you're in landscape, you can use digital pads, which feel pretty good since they're not really tied to any kind of reflexes. It's not like you're trying to, the reflex stuff is all in the combat with the tapping. So anyway, it's fun. It's cool. If you're not looking for that kind of experience, then it won't be for you. And if you come in expecting it to be like totally free with nothing, with no monetization, then it won't be for you either. But it's good. I recommend trying it. Do either of you have any designs on playing Elder Scrolls Blades?
Nope.
Probably not.
I don't particularly like the Elder Scrolls series, so
I would say it is absolutely nothing at all like an Elder Scrolls game, other than it's in first person. Like the structure and like it's got the same kind of feel in terms of the lore and the visuals and the characters, but it is if you're going into it expecting it to be like an Elder Scrolls game on mobile, push that out of your mind. Not to say that you should play it. I don't know that you would like it, Alex, but like anyone who is like excited about it and wants to play an Elder Scrolls game on mobile, it doesn't feel anything like Elder Scrolls at all when you're playing it. It is definitely a mobile dungeon crawling game. That's what it is. They did a good job with like sort of the atmosphere and some of the character designs and stuff. So yeah. And then the last thing that I will talk about that I have played is a small crowd-funded thing that is still trying to get it to find its space legs, as it were, called Star Citizen.
Very small.
So I think I've talked briefly about Star Citizen before on the show, but I backed it like ages and ages ago when it was still like the promise of it was still so fresh. And I've kind of stuck with it to mostly to see the train wreck around it, because I assumed that the train would continue to wreck. And after kind of dipping into it a bit this morning and seeing what's coming in the next update, I actually have a lot of confidence in the game now. I think it's taking way too long, and I think it's just absurd that their single player narrative campaign isn't going to come out until late next year. That is so wild to me, because from what I've seen of that campaign, it doesn't do anything particularly like complicated. Like they have they've been tweaking the flight model of the ships, which is very important for that campaign because it's mostly space combat, but it's not like an open world thing. Like, as far as I know, you're just going on missions like you're playing X-Wing or something like that. So it's weird to me that it's taking so long, but whatever. A lot of what they've shown is very high quality, and playing it a bit today, like that game, the new flight model that they've added is really good. That game is going to be phenomenal for people like me, I think, if and when it finally releases. At this point, they've got a pretty good proof of concept for what the wider world will look like. I think there's something like 32 star systems planned for it in like that are handmade, with then a bunch of procedural stuff built around that. And so far, they've more or less finished one of those systems, and that's what you can sort of play right now. And it's functionally pretty fantastic. Like when you boot the game, you wake up in your bed. Not all of this is recent stuff either. This has been stuff they've built on for a long time, but you wake up in your bed. There's a character creator now, so you can customize stuff. In 3.5, which is coming out, you can customize things on a much deeper level. It's almost like a Sims kind of customizer. Right now it's pretty basic. And then you have to, the reason this game is cool is because you have to do things like you get up from your bed, you have to walk out to the station ship claim terminal. You have to select which of your ships from your ship inventory you want to pull. And then it'll say, okay, so your ship is on landing pad D8. And then you walk to D8. The whole time, there's all kinds of other people around you with you. You walk to landing pad D8. You have to go out of the airlock. You have to push the button to cycle the airlock so you can go outside. You go outside. You push the button to open your ship. Your character like animates climbing up the ladder into your ship. You like walk up to your chair and you sit down in the chair and it spins around. And then you have to like hit the button physically to like power on the engines and everything. So it's really that experience. Like what I tried to do at first, the reason I reinstalled it is because I thought that the new patch was out. So I flew to the new location that they added, which is a city world. And once I got there, the hyperspace travel is incredible, or like the jumps, but most people will hate it because it goes fast. But like it took me about 10 minutes, I think, to fly from the starting station to this planet. And like in that 10 minutes, you can get up and walk around your ship, and like you can crawl into the bed that you have on your ship. And like if you had a bigger ship with cargo, I'm sure you could go down and like look at the cargo while your ship is flying through space. They're going to have like big multi-crew ships and passenger ships and stuff. So you could go around and like talk to your friends and your real life friends, and who all I'm sure will be playing this game. And you can like, you know, play mini games, I'm sure, and stuff like that. Like it's very much my kind of thing. But then I got to the place where this new city's supposed to be there, and there was nothing there, no planet there. And then I realized that I didn't have the most recent patch, because the most recent patch is on the public test realm, because for some reason this alpha video game has a public test realm and the live realm to run two different branches of its alpha, which is so dumb.
That's weird.
Yeah. But I got frustrated and I quit the game because I had run out of fuel. So I was just stranded. I later realized that your fuel regenerates as you fly, because it's like hydrogen fuel. So if you fly around, you're scooping hydrogen in space. So you could never be stranded. But then I booted it back up, and because I realized I had never flown to a planet and landed. So I decided I would try that out. And it's an interesting, I'm a big Elite Dangerous fan too. And Elite is everything feels kind of like sludgy. Like I love what it does, but landing on a planet takes a long time, and the payoff doesn't feel great. Whereas with Star Citizen, I warped to a new planet, and yes, it's sort of slow for most people, but it works how you want it to. Like you can like do a quick like jump orbit around a planet to get within close of where you want to land. And then these planets, it's kind of like if No Man's Sky had actually planet-sized planets and had stuff on them to look at. Like you can pull up a list of all the things that are interesting to go see. And like I picked this one aid station on this desert planet, and I flew down to the surface, and it looks fantastic. And then I landed outside this aid station, and for some reason it just so happened there was another person landing there. I don't know why, but they were a real person. And we both touched down, and they were like kind of wary of me being there too, because you can just shoot each other if you want. And you can go into this aid station, and there's like stuff in there to click on, and it's cool. Like if they fill it out with content that is fun to play, the bones of that thing are really, really fantastic. The problem right now is there's no progression at all, really. You can kind of increase a rank number, I think, but it doesn't do anything. And you can't buy new ships or anything in the game because you buy new ships with real money right now, which is not going to be how the final game is. Basically, anything you've bought with real money, you'll start with in the final game, but the final game is just going to be a space sim where you can earn credits and buy new ships and stuff. So I don't know. They have to like make the content interesting, but the bones of what they have and the structure and the flying the ships around and getting in them and taking off and setting a hyperspace course and then getting up from your chair and checking on stuff is very cool. So hopefully they get there.
Very cool.
So
sounds good. Well, it's probably more than I have. I basically have one game, which we really don't need to talk about because it's Stardew Valley, and we talked about it last week. And, I just played it because we're talking about it.
But if I do all of them in this room,
I should just try it, like set up a new thing, and then multiple hours later, it's like, oh, I'm back in on this.
Did Sam influence this?
Yep. Yep. So that game's real good. It's kind of like a perfect game for me, and I wish there were more games like that where I feel like it manages to be both chill and have a great sense of progression at the same time. So you can just do what you want, but you have things to work towards if you would like to. Mm-hmm. So I need more games like Stardew Valley out.
There was a 3D one on Steam.
My Time at Portia.
Yeah, My Time at Portia. That's what it was. Apparently,
that game is really weird.
Yeah, apparently it's not great, but it's close.
I like it, but it's weird.
Yeah. There's also Graveyard Keeper, which is very broken.
I played it, but I played it for a while, which was fine until it completely crashed and like lost a bunch of time.
Yep.
I kind of was like, fuck this, because I liked it in theory, but
it's very buggy, very crashy, very unoptimized.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that if they could figure out a way to optimize it and make sure that it doesn't crash as often, I could get into it. But there's something a little bit demotivating when you suddenly lose like several hours of progress.
Yeah. But you don't lose that with Stardew Valley.
But you don't. You just have the day, which is the day mechanic is the biggest like time sink of them all, because you go, oh well, I know what I need to do this morning, and then you just play another day, and it constantly loops, and you keep playing more days, and you realize, wait, I've stayed up way too late doing Stardew Valley. Yeah, so I don't know if I have much more to say about it. I want that new Stardew Valley but Harry Potter game to come out soon. Witchbrook, because I feel like that's something that I could that could be exactly the game I've always wanted. If it's anywhere near Stardew Valley, but it has like the whole magic school thing.
Yeah.
So I'm apparently now I looked it up a while ago because I was like, what's happening with it? Apparently now since Chucklefish has released Wargroove, all of their internal devs are hard at work at Witchbrook. So hopefully that'll come out soonish. Cool. Yeah, so did that. The other thing I've been doing lately is reading. Yay, books. I just finished, and I'm not going to get into all of the books I've been reading. Just isn't even that many. I don't know why I phrased it like that. But I just finished a good Star Wars book that if you're looking for Star Wars content, you guys should be reading Lost Stars, which is like, it's there. So if for people who aren't as following in on Star Wars extended universe stuff, a while back they basically said, okay, all the content released before this time except for the movies and a couple other things is not canon. And so now we have a smaller canon of books when for a long time there was just like too many books. But for a lot of people ranking recent Star Wars canon books, Lost Stars is pretty much the top of the list. So I was decided to read it, and you guys, if you have any interest in that, looking at you, Pat, it's really, really good because it's very specifically going through the original trilogy. But focusing on two characters who are kind of there on the periphery and kind of their relationship in a way that it throughout the original three films, basically because their childhood friends turned romantic interests. One of them ends up with the Empire, one of them ends up with the Rebellion. So there's that element of like kind of star-crossed romance, but also kind of going deeper into are there good people working for the Empire? What does that mean? Can you still be considered a good person if you're working for it? Like it gets really deep into the kind of decisions of people in that time frame in the Star Wars universe, which is really good. So it's really excellent. I'm going to Star Wars Celebration this next week, and the author's going to be there, so I might just blubber at her about how much I love this book and be like, it's so good. I'll just hopefully I'll get I read it on my iPad, but then I got a physical copy of it so I could get it signed. So
cool. I should probably read it. I'm not I struggle sometimes with the like there are good people in the Empire thing, because like it's such and I mean the original analogy was such a fascist analogy, so right. So it has to be handled very delicately, but I also trust your judgment on that. So
I think it does it really well, mostly because you have various characters, and I won't spoil who, that defect from the Empire at very specific situations when they start seeing the fascism, and you get really into how they're justifying it to themselves. And so it's not necessarily even excused, like, oh, well, because they thought of this is okay, but it's really how these people could justify these actions to themselves. Like a lot of the book focuses on the aftermath of the end of A New Hope. So the destruction of Alderaan, and then also the destruction of the Death Star. So it's specifically, there's a lot of people kind of rationalizing like, well, they thought they were building this Death Star to do this, but it didn't happen. So I feel like it gets really into the psychology of it, where you go, like, you kind of understand it, even though it's not acceptable. And I think it walks the fine line very well.
That's good.
Especially since these the characters are all about similar ages to Luke and Leia. So they're all growing up basically within the sphere of influence of the empire and the propaganda of, oh, this is the keeping peace, and this is why you're doing this, and
And if you take a smarter look at what that means, I mean, the movies only have enough room to hint at the original trilogy, but it's much bigger. I mean, it's over the whole galaxy, right? So like, it's a much different thing than what what it would look like, what it does look like when it happens on Earth. You know, like there's an interesting examination there. What I always worry about with, there's some older Star Wars stuff that like makes the Empire look cool in a way,
right? And
that I have a huge problem with separating and the problem it comes in when like TIE fighters are cool. The game TIE Fighter is a cool game, you know. When it focuses on the equipment and like the like flying a TIE fighter around, that's a different thing. What I don't like is that there is some works of old Star Wars fiction that is not canon anymore that makes the ideology of the Empire look like
right. And that's something that I have a lot of issues with too, especially with how much branding goes around like stormtroopers and
exactly. That sort of stuff.
I have that's probably one of my biggest issues that I have with the franchise as well. Is that
and they've largely gotten away from that, but I'd like to hope that they continue to.
Yeah. And I mean, to the point where there are people who are like, you know, like I actively had to have an argument with a coworker once where she's like, you know, the Empire was not that bad. And I'm like, they fucking destroyed a planet for no reason.
They committed genocide.
They committed genocide for like no reason. Yeah. They had a thing called the Death Star. Yeah. Like, you don't think, this is a little bit of a like.
And it's really heavy-handed in the movies on purpose to make it clear that they are the bad guys and that they're evil. And so while I think it's because it's a fantasy and because it's not real, I don't think that something like TIE Fighter is problematic. I do think that fiction that seeks to humanize them too much without acknowledging how awful they are could be problematic. But it sounds like this walks that line in a way that is not bad.
Oh, yeah. And it gets to the point where it's like, you know, they've been taught all their lives that the Empire is the only way, that they're basically being told from the Empire that rebels are terrorists, basically.
Right.
So they think that what they're doing is for the greater good. And then they start realizing with like this destruction of Alderaan, and it's kind of like how certain people react to it.
I think what I want to see, and this might exist too, but what I want to see is I want to see the novel series that goes really deep on how the Republic is able to turn public perception towards the Empire being a good thing in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. That's the bit of fiction that I'm really curious about, because that's sort of we don't really get to see that as much. It's kind of more like the Republic are more or less the good guys. You could make arguments about that. The politics of the prequel trilogy's politics are actually a lot more interesting than what happens in those movies. And it's kind of a shame that it's not represented more in the movies. But I'd like to see how those politics, that the transformation into the Empire, I'd love for them to hand that to a really skilled author to sort of dive into that.
And to a small extent, you get that in this book.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I think. But like the book starts when these characters are children, and there's like a pre-existing sort of not quite caste system, but more of like a class system.
Yeah.
Where one character is from like a much lower class and one character is a much higher class, and like the promise of the Empire for them, it's kind of like as like kind of an equalizer, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's really so they think, oh, this is like, you know, you can if you work hard and you kind of in an American dream kind of way, like if you work hard and dedicate yourself to the Empire, it doesn't necessarily matter where you came from.
Sure.
But then it starts to criticize, like, you know, the Empire is also doing, like, it says that, but it's also kind of destroying this planet. It's removing all of the life from the planet. It's basically expects you to give up your cultural identity. Like it's Yeah, so I agree that it's a super fine line, but I would still recommend you check this out. It's
Cool.
And I've been reading a couple other Star Wars books, so I'm trying to decide which one I want to read next, especially with Celebration coming up this week.
Cool. Yeah.
But,
if you want a fun bit of, I believe Nora Wexley is a major character in these books too, right?
She's a big character in the Aftermath books.
Aftermath, okay.
Which I finished the first one, and I'm going to pick up the second one.
Yeah, I got to read those too, because I don't know much about her, but she's one of my favorite characters from the X-Wing Miniatures game. So
yeah, and the books, and the first book, a lot of people were a little bit iffy on, but I actually really enjoyed it, and it's focused on a lot on her son, who's Snap Wexley, who's in the movies, and it's I kind of love Temin, yeah, but his nickname Snap.
Yep.
But and then also kind of they form a little a crew eventually, including the droid Mr. Bones, who's the best droid.
Fun note on Star Wars canon before we wrap it up. So like you said, Disney kind of obliterated a ton of expanded universe and made it into soft canon that they can draw from and say is official whenever they want, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Which is the smart way for them to do it. The expanded universe of Star Wars was really convoluted. It's much better for them to be more selective and curate who, in my opinion, who can make canon work.
Well, also, I just don't understand why some of the people who are really attached to it necessarily even wanted them to do direct adaptations of the novels. I mean, I don't know. Those novels still exist, and you can still go pick them up and you can still read them. So I don't know.
The fact of the matter is, a lot of them aren't very good.
Yeah,
that's one thing that Star Wars fans kind of need to chill on. I think like those kinds of Star Wars fans is. I read all the Rogue Squadron books. Like I read tons and tons of Star Wars novels when I was younger, and about 30% of them are good. And then 40% of them are, they're kind of, I don't like to use the term guilty pleasure, but you can like, and this is how most of the Rogue Squadron books were. They're okay. They're fun to read. They're not great, but they're okay. And then there's a slice of them that are just bad too. So anyway, like the Thrawn trilogy is great. There's like good writing that exists. Although the Thrawn trilogy gets into that problem that I was talking about, where it makes that character look cool and appealing, and that character is horrible. Yeah. And I definitely don't like how some people reacted to that series of books, but we don't have to get into it. The funny thing that I was going to bring up about the canon is a lot of the officially licensed stuff that comes out now. I think pretty much everything is canon, right? They're just more selective about who can use the license.
Right.
So what that means is that the Star Wars X-Wing miniatures game is canon. Releases for that are canon. There's not a narrative component to X-Wing really. It's just like the ship came out, so like they release an X-Wing and it has pilots that you can select for it. And there's always generic pilots like Red Squadron Ace, so you can fly 4 Red Squadron Aces. And then there's named pilots like Luke Skywalker. You can only fly 1 copy of a Luke Skywalker piloted ship. So like, you can fly Luke and Wedge Antilles and Thane Kyrell.
He's the one of the main characters in Lost Stars.
Very cool. Yeah, he's a pilot in X-Wing. All the pilots are real characters from the fiction. Like they're all characters that exist. All the named pilots. Sometimes they have to stretch things though. So for example, last month, the Clone Wars came to X-Wing. They released the Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, separatists. And the Sith Infiltrator was one of the ships they released, which is Darth Maul's ship, the Scimitar from Episode 1. So obviously, it makes sense to have Darth Maul be one of the pilots for it. It also makes sense for his droid 066, which is a funny name for a droid, considering what Order 66 is in Star Wars. 066 is a droid that can fly it. It's his droid. I haven't read enough of the Maul comics, but he is a canonical character that can pilot that ship for Maul. And then they have a generic pilot, because they always have a generic pilot called a Dark Courier, whatever. But the other named pilot is Count Dooku, who never flew that ship at all. Ever, and has his own ship, but because X-Wing releases are technically canon, now at some point Dooku flew the scimitar. And even funnier than that, he's a better pilot than Maul is in that ship too. Like he's kind of objectively better in it, especially with the scimitar title, which you can take all of these ships. You can, if they had a special ship, you could take the title card with it, and it makes it cost a little bit more. So like I'm currently flying a list that includes 2, Darth Maul flying 1 Sith infiltrator and Dooku flying the other Sith infiltrator, but Dooku is flying the one that is technically called the scimitar because he's better with that title. It's so funny and wild. Star Wars canon is still a mess, and it's a cleaner mess than it used to be, but it's still a mess.
It is, but I kind of love it. Like,
me too.
I feel like as I've gotten more into Star Wars and more, I'm like, I kind of love the bullshit about it as a universe. To the point where I'm really excited that what's part of the merch that they're releasing for Celebration is actively, they're releasing a lunchbox that uses images from the holiday special. It's from the Boba Fett cartoon.
Well, and that's still canon, right?
I
think the holiday special is still.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No.
Well, then they shouldn't be putting out a lunchbox.
They've
products only.
They've brought out brought some of the things into canon through other means. Like the B. Arthur bartender has been mentioned in a story, I think, and the Chef Gourmanda has been brought up in a story, and those are 2 of the best parts of the holiday special, so I'm like, thank you.
Okay, so elements of it are canon.
And then also I think that like Chewie having a wife Mala and son Lumpy is still canon, but it's just been brought into canon by other people, which I kind of love, because that's been consistently maligned part that they would love us to forget exists, but fans are still like, no, let's bring back the holiday special. So I am just thrilled that I'm in a universe where I can I'm going to try to buy official holiday special merch.
That's great.
Yeah. So I'm actively going to try to buy that lunchbox, and we'll see if I can get it.
Very nice.
All right, so on that note, bookending with not video games and ending or with not video games, I think that'll do it for this week's episode of Gaming Picks, unless you guys have anything else you'd like to add.
I don't think so.
No.
Okay, so Alex, where can people find you?
I have WhatsApp.
Okay, cool. Pat, how about you?
You can find me at JesterPC on Twitter with links to the other stuff that I do there.
Cool. And you can find me on Twitter at WRITERSERENYTY. And I haven't done Twitch in a while, but Twitch at Happy Beeps here. And I just bought that domain for a website, so we'll see what I do with it.
Hell yeah.
I am the proud owner of happybeepshere.com. I don't know what I'll be doing with it.
Not .bike.
Not .bike. I could have gotten .happybeepshere.club for a little bit cheaper, but I didn't want to do that. Yeah, so I think that's going to do it for us. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Yeah. We're not on YouTube, but we are on YouTube, but
we have a larger presence on Pornhub.
God, we do, don't we?
Yep.
Okay, but leave reviews, everything. Even if you don't like this podcast, just leave us a very glowing, happy review. Spite us.
And watch the Playing Hard documentary on Netflix, which is about For Honor.
Yeah.
And the development thereof.
It's going to make me want to play For Honor again, and I don't have time for that. So we'll see. Sounds good, though.
Sounds good. Well, see you later, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.